So, specializing in relationship coaching obviously means that I work with a lot of divorce. And my work around divorce is always to find a really empowered way for both people to emerge from the experience undamaged, not carrying such huge negative emotion, because there really are very workable, empowered ways that people can go through a divorce experience. So, if you are going through a divorce, have been through a divorce, and are looking for a new way to really process what has happened to you, or what is about to happen, or what is happening to you, I wanted to have a conversation with you today about how to reframe what you are experiencing through divorce. And what reframing simply means is choosing to have a very different perspective of what is going on. And that different perspective can last for an hour, it can last for a day, it can last for a week, because we know that the emotions that we feel through something, like a divorce or a separation, are very fluid. How we feel in the morning is not how we feel in the afternoon. That people allow themselves to get very overwhelmed by negative emotions that come up around a divorce. And today I just want to give you a few reframes of how to shift that negativity to help you get through the process in a more enlightened way. So I think the first word that comes up for everybody who talks about divorce is failure. I hate it. It's the most incorrect word to use for me. I think it is hugely courageous when couples can really face each other and say, as much as I have loved this journey, I can no longer do this. It takes great courage to say goodbye to something. And failure is just never a part of it. So people do get left with a feeling of failure, a feeling of being rejected, a feeling of not being good enough, a feeling of shame. Your self-esteem and your self-confidence takes a knock. You feel abandoned, you're fearful of what the future is going to look like. For someone being left, you feel very victimized by what has gone on. And all of those emotions are very real. But the problem is when you hang on to them and choose to make them a permanent state that you live in throughout the divorce process. So let's talk about reframing, how you could shift or move some of those emotions. So I've spoken about this a lot on other videos, of understanding that everybody has got very different perspectives of reality. And we all have filters that determine how we perceive reality. And that means that the way we talk about stuff, the way we see things, the way we define things is extremely unique to us. And this is really important to remember when you're going through a separation or a divorce, because what your ex or your partner is saying doesn't necessarily mean it's your truth. And, if your partner is saying they're leaving you because, you're not enough, you've got to sit with that statement and really see what your resonance is with that statement. In your reality, in your life, is that statement accurate for you? And if it's not, then let it go, because it is simply their perspective. Now, I'm not telling you to go into denial here. It's very easy to bullshit other people. It is really hard to bullshit yourself, because you know exactly what has gone on in that relationship, and you know where you did not show up, and you know what behaviors you were engaging in that contributed to the erosion of the marriage. So a huge amount of reframing how you view divorce as taking ownership for your part of what went down here. But letting your partner have their perspective and you have your perspective. There are two different relationships going on here. Your relationship with them and their relationship with you. And they're always going to look very different. So reframing is accepting that. The biggest way to reframe a divorce is to change the story. Everyone going through a divorce has the story that they tell everybody about who's to blame, who's at fault, what happened. And it almost becomes a bit of a rehearsed script that you repeat to all the people in your life. And this is from my experience of hearing people's stories of their divorce, is that it's usually quite a victimized one. It's all their fault. They did this to me. I was just fine, and I was left, and it's not accurate. So how do we reframe the story? Well, let's look at the statements that you use to describe what's going on. So reframe would be, let's say that you'll make a statement of, I was abandoned. Well, you can say that you were abandoned, or you could say, I was freed. It's choosing to see it from a different perspective. You could say, I wasn't enough, or you could say, I needed something else for my life. You could say, he had changed so much I couldn't relate, or you could say, I had evolved in my own life to a point where I couldn't connect anymore. You could say, she rejected me, or you could say we had simply become incompatible. You could say, oh, he was so toxic, or you could say, I didn't have healthy enough boundaries. And I'm sure the theme that you're seeing here is that reframing the story means having to take ownership of your part of the relationship. And when you pull your ownership in, you are then 100% responsible for how you feel about this process. So I want to read something. You all know that, one of my favorite people who ever was one of the biggest mentors of my life was the brilliant Debbie Ford. And one of the best books Debbie ever wrote was called Spiritual Divorce. And if you're going through a divorce, I really highly recommend you get this book to do some work on your journey through divorce, if you can't afford to work with a therapist or a coach around your divorce process. But this sentence for me sums up why it's so important to change your story. As long as you continue to blame someone else, you are stuck in the illusion that you are powerless over your condition. Until you take total responsibility for the circumstances you find yourself in, you remain powerless to change them. Once you embrace your own part in the circumstances or the story, you can then begin to face and embrace what is already within you. So it's just a very powerful statement around taking ownership of your part of the story. Another way that you can reframe what is going on with a divorce is to look at it from a very spiritual perspective. So when you can pull yourself in an objective way away from the human kind of defeated emotions you're feeling, and you can look at it from a spiritual perspective, it's consider the possibility that there was a sacred spiritual contract that existed between you and this partner, and that you were in each other's lives for the journey and the lessons of deep self-growth. Now, Eckhart Tolle describes this beautifully. He says, if you can accept that your relationships are here to make you conscious instead of happy, then your relationship becomes a wonderful self-mastery tool that keeps realigning you with your higher purpose for living. And for a lot of people, it really helps them to reframe a divorce by seeing that the lesson was learned, and that part of their life is no longer beneficial for their higher purpose, and that they need to free each other so that they can both go and experience their future lessons with other people. So the sentence around seeing this from a spiritual perspective is, were you rejected or were you released from the contract? So if you can see it as being released, it's also quite an empowering way to look at reframing the divorce. Relationship really is, the health of the relationship is determined by the frequency of the two people participating in that relationship. So when you are vibrating at a very specific frequency, powerful relationships are where partners connect with each other at that same vibration. If you are not paying attention to your own life, your own health, your own integrity, your own self-work, your vibration lowers, and it becomes very hard for partners to maintain a connection when they're just both operating from such completely different places. I see this a lot with people where the one partner chooses to start a journey of self-discovery. They'll do coaching, they go and do workshops, they go and do, journeys, they read incredible books, they go through massive transformations, all the while really wanting their partners to share those journeys with them, and the partner's just not interested, and that's where the rift happens. So when you're simply just operating on such different frequency levels, the relationship is going to fall apart. It's not about being right or wrong. It's not that the one doing the work is in a better place or a worse place. It's simply, you cannot find that connection. So instead of saying he left me behind, it was he went into a place that wasn't real for me. Like he traveled a path that didn't resonate with me anymore. And it's okay to own that. That's far more empowered than saying, he abandoned me or he left me. So just pay attention to, the frequency that you're holding on to coming into a divorce. A big thing that I see, and I think this is where most of the pain exists for people when a separation happens, is it literally feels like half of you has disappeared. It literally feels like half your heart has been ripped out of your chest. When you miss the person, when you thought everything was fine and then it's suddenly over, the deep pain that people feel, it feels like, literally a part of them is ripped out of them. And what happened here is this is where people have that statement of, I found my other half, or they completed me. And those are very disempowering statements to have in a relationship. A relationship, you have got to be completely entire and whole and complete before you get into a relationship with someone. And for most people, they are. But what starts to happen in a relationship, and anyone in a relationship has experienced this, is that compromises start to creep in. And every time you compromise yourself for your partner, you are chipping off a piece of yourself and allowing them to fill that space. So slowly people begin to give up friendships. They give up spiritual paths. They give up hobbies. They give up things that were important to them because their partner is asking them to, or because their partner gives them a judgment about it. And slowly people start to kind of erode or chip away at themselves, saying, no, but compromise is necessary in a relationship. So when you've given so much of yourself away in compromise and allowed your partner to fill up that space, of course you're going to feel quite raw and exposed when the divorce is happening. So, nobody needs to complete you. What you need to do in a divorce is reframe this experience as, I now get to go on a new journey of discovery to find my whole self. And that is completely on me. That has nothing to do with anybody else. I don't need anybody else to make me feel anything about myself. I am fully responsible for that. So go on that journey of empowering yourself to be complete within yourself. If you have a pen and paper, I think I'm going to ask you some questions, and it's just for you to sit with if you're struggling with a divorce experience. The first thing I want to ask you is, what behaviors had you accepted that were really not okay? People tend to really romanticize the good stuff in a divorce and bypass the bad stuff. And it's important to pay attention to what was going on and to really own the fact that actually there was a lot of unworkable stuff. You've got to be real about that. So ask yourself, what behaviors had you been accepting that were really not okay, but you weren't doing anything about it? What compromises had you made that you became resentful of later on in the relationship? Everybody's made some compromises in their relationship. So ask yourself, what compromises were made, and are you ever going to be willing to do that to yourself again? I want you to think about, what did you have to give up in your life for that relationship? And you now have the chance to reclaim that stuff for your life. Always a big question is, what boundaries had you allowed to be violated again and again? And the other way around, how did you violate your ex's boundaries? Boundaries is a big one that triggers divorce, and it's something to really look at. And the bottom line is, what were you pretending not to hear? What were you pretending not to see? And what were you pretending not to know about what was going on in your relationship? Be brutally honest with yourself. So the final takeaway is about reframing how you think about divorce or behave in a divorce is this: you are not the situation. So find that objective place to observe what is going on. But as with all things in life, you cannot control what is happening outside of you. You can absolutely control your reaction to what is happening. So focus on your own response more than what is happening outside of you. Pay attention to what you are learning or what you have learned about yourself through this process. Guys, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. If you're in the process of going through a divorce, you can't just lay this out in some logical way and follow some specific path. You have to just stay on the day that you are on. So it's okay if you don't have all the answers right now of how this is going to work. You just take it one step at a time. And one breath at a time, one step at a time, focus on the day that you're on. So reframing is just simply always choosing to see yourself in a bigger place, in a higher light, in a bigger vibration, and taking ownership for the fact that some part of you was also clear that this relationship was no longer what you wanted, and that your higher purpose is further down the line right now, and perhaps this relationship was never going to allow you to get to that place in your own life. So if you are struggling with divorce, please, book sessions with me. This is what I do. I really support couples to find great ways to have divorces. It's amazing how many people can find really workable, constructive ways to continue to co-parent and to have divorces where it's a very loving experience. If you're in a place where you're unsure whether you should be getting a divorce or not, and you're not quite there yet, there is no clear answer for that. That is an incredibly personal decision, and that is going to require a session to get clear on what exactly is going on. So, like I said earlier, if you watched my other video, please don't have a knee-jerk reaction to wanting to end your relationship based on what has been going on in lockdown. Lockdown is a very strange, highly unusual time, very pressurized. And that is not the time to be making some really serious long-term decision about your relationship. So it's natural that a lot of couples are going through hard times during lockdown. Rather do coaching, rather do work on your relationship than just leap straight to the divorce wagon. Because a lot of stuff can shift if you're willing to work on it. So sending you all lots of love. Have a beautiful week ahead, and I will see you next Wednesday.